Hello and welcome to the first episode of My Story, the first of a groundbreaking series brought to you by FIDA, the Federation of Women Lawyers. We'll be bringing you real stories about real people and the challenges they face surviving in Ugandan society. Every week, a panel of legal experts will be talking to us about how the people sharing their stories with me can use knowledge of the law to navigate even the most traumatic situations. I'm Barbara Angopa, and through their lives, I'll be taking you on a journey to discover how you can protect your families by understanding how the law can work for you. But before we meet our team of expert lawyers and life coaches, meet Lucy Lizinda. When I met her last week, she told me how she's coping with an ordeal faced by thousands of Ugandan women when her husband evicted her from her marital home and moved in his mistress. We've changed her name to protect her identity. Let's take a look.
I met my ex-husband in 1997, and then we had a courtship for like 3 years. Then we got married in 2000, and our wedding was fantastic. It was lovely.
When did things first start going wrong?
My husband lost a job. He was working in a Ministry of Works, and life started beginning to become hard. So my auntie invited me to UK, at least to earn a little bit of money, because life was not easy, and we had 2 children at that time. So it was not so easy for us. So me and my husband, we agreed, and I had to go to UK to get some more income for the family. Whenever I called home, he was not in the house. So that's when I realized that there was something going on. Then he confirmed. He said, yes, now I have a son. I told him that maybe you're just joking. That's not true. So I told him, if it's like that, I have to come and save my marriage. When I came back, the first day I came, he threw me out of the house, but I had to enter by force because I had to see my children. So I stayed there for like 1 month, and I was sleeping in my kids' bedroom, and my husband was not talking to me. We were like strangers. Then after 1 month, he himself packed all my bags and took them to my mom. And he threw me. I was just outside. I went outside just in my towel, and he threw me out of the house. Actually, when I was in England, I had to spend all the money I was earning. I opened a business for him where he's now working. I've been sending money, and I didn't even count. I've been sending school fees, upkeep, building houses, so I can't count how much I've been sending. It's a lot of money.
Just to estimate, how much do you think it is? Is it 20 million?
No, it's more than that. More than like 70 million.
Have you actually applied for a divorce from him?
I just applied, but we've not tackled on that. Yeah.
Okay, now we've heard Lucy's story. Here to discuss it with me is Sarah, who's a successful business entrepreneur, and Racheal, who's an advocate for FIDA, the Federation of Women Lawyers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, from a perspective of the ordinary man or woman on the street, they'll be surprised that Lucy's actually seeking a divorce. She was married in church, yet her husband's mistress is now living in the house she built. Why has she been advised to seek a divorce in order to start the petition against her husband to get her property or share of property back?
Currently, as the law is in Uganda, it's only married people who get to own this property together, as in if you're legally married under the laws of Uganda, that you own jointly with your partner. If, for example, it's land and it's registered land and your name is not on the certificate of title, then you own property. But because you're married, then you jointly own this property together. So it is only on divorce or separation that we shall have you able to own property of your own. So that is when the sharing of the property will come in. So you cannot begin sharing property when you're still married to each other.
Culturally and religiously, it completely goes against the instincts of most women to seek a divorce. How is it changing? How do you see that in your work? And how would you persuade women to take what is for some of them a very difficult step?
I think when we look back, divorce has been a no-go area for most women in Uganda, not only because of church, but also our customs, where they assume that once married, you have taken a vow to remain in that marriage until death do you part. And where there are customary marriages, there is a tendency that it is you are owned by the clan, and so you cannot talk about divorce, because even at death, the clan continues to own you, so you stay in that marriage. So the perception of divorce is very different here. However, with the changing of times, I think people are coming to grips that the contracts they enter into at marriage can be revoked in courts of law. And that is where people are now beginning to appreciate that divorce, marriage, whether in church or in a mosque, or whether in the registrar's office, is a contractual obligation undertaken by two people. And so likewise, you can take a divorce.
And to add on that, FIDA has gone ahead to bring the cultural leaders and religious leaders on board to understand and appreciate the troubles that women go through in their marriages, and also that leads them to want to get out of these marriages.
If I could just add on, if you look at Lucy's case, she has been evicted from that home and another woman has entered into the home. Much as the marriage in church, you take vows not to be put asunder. They have already been put asunder. And unfortunately, the church has no role in getting the other woman out of that place, unless Lucy seeks some court order.
Well, she told me that she's contributed the most amount of money to the relationship. And while she was in London, she was sending remittances back to Uganda for the purposes of building the matrimonial home. But are the records that she's been sending, is that enough to help her divorce case when she's claiming for the compensation?
During the subsistence of the marriage and on dissolution of the marriage, she has a right to own property, and she has a share in this matrimonial property, irrespective of what contribution you have made. Because we appreciate that in Uganda, not every woman wakes up in the morning to go to work, to a paying job, but some of them contribute while they stay at home in maybe housework or looking after the children, because then you would have maybe engaged a housemaid to look after this child, and you're going to pay them. And that is also her contribution. So whatever contribution she has made, that makes it matrimonial property. And that should be shared equally, because they have equal rights under the law.
Now, if you thought that Lucy's case couldn't get worse, stay tuned to my story. After the break, we'll be discussing the bombshell that threatens to leave her with nothing. Stay with us.
The family side, they're saying that I'm trying to steal their land. Yet I'm not stealing. I just build those houses for my children, at least to get school fees out of it.
Welcome back to my story. We've been discussing the case of Lucy Luzinda, who's in the struggle of her life to reclaim the marital property she built with her husband before he pushed her out to move in his mistress. Now, the blow she suffered has been all the worse because the investments she made were on her husband's ancestral land. But before we discuss this, let's take a look at how the decision has affected Lucy's life and that of her 2 children.
When I got suspicious that he was conniving with someone, I kept some of the leaves where I was sending money. I just have a little bit. And I have some messages on my phone. I mean, the messages like he was sending that I've sent this money and all that stuff. But I was not keeping everything because he was my husband and I knew we were doing our things, not his things. I bought my own plot somewhere here in Bunamuhaya. But because we are lacking some money, I had to sell that land. And my husband told me that at least let's sell this one. If you want to build a house, you can build on my land because it's a little bit big, yeah? So we had to sell the other one so that he can get something to get for a living. That's why I built a house on that land. But about the land title, it's not in his name, but I think it is in his mom's because all the brothers have portions on the land. The family side, they are saying that I'm trying to steal their land. Yet I'm not stealing. I just build those houses for my children, at least to get school fees out of it. But they are saying that I want to steal their land.
It's been more than 6 months you've been struggling to resolve this situation.
Right.
How has it been for you to cope with this?
It has not been a very easy task because when you don't have anyone to help you and you have all the children, you don't have money, you have to struggle a lot. So it has been really a hard time for me.
How do you think this will end for you?
In the end, maybe it might come to a success. At least not to sweat for nothing. At least to have something because I've been struggling a lot.
Now, the decision to build matrimonial property or the family property on a husband's family land or ancestral land is really common in Uganda, particularly in rural areas. Would you say it's always a mistake for a woman to invest on her husband's family's land should the relationship go sour?
Looking at the way ancestral land is treated in this part of Buganda, it is really a mistake. It is unadvisable for a woman to invest in ancestral land because we have all these families coming up and family members of the man coming up and saying, this is our land. It is not your husband's land. Unless it is really demarcated and shared between the children of the home and each person is given their particular plot or part of the land, then maybe there you can go ahead and invest because there it becomes the man's property and you're entitled as the wife because it becomes matrimonial property.
If you opt to build on any ancestral land, but maybe if you felt that you had no alternative, which I found very intriguing because if you have money to build, I think the presumption is you have money to buy. So the money you use to build should have first been invested in purchasing land of your own or with your husband. Much as it that Lucy did not do it, we are now dealing with a real situation. What happens? In that case now she has an obligation to find out what are the intricacies involved in this we call ancestral land. Ancestral land, once you should assume, it is held true maybe most often as a burial ground. So even if sometimes that marriage was to go sour, or even if the husband was to die, chances are that the customary heir would take over that house or that property in that area. Secondly, if you found out that in the area like Buganda, all land would be titled, you'd have to go into finding out who is the registered owner of this land. And it is from that area that Lucy will now start looking at how does she get some land back.
Lucy was really trusting of her husband, that she even sold her own plot of land, which had a land title, and invested it in the matrimonial home, the house that they built together. Now, how can she claim this back?
On contracting a marriage, every property owned before or during the marriage is considered matrimonial property. Even if it was your property that you had before getting married and you get married to this man, you become one. And that means the property is for the two of you. So even when she sold this house to contribute to her matrimonial house, then that becomes matrimonial property and her contribution is also considered. Even if it is not documented that she contributed this much, it is already clear that it is matrimonial property and it should be shared equally.
I think we can say there's nothing wrong with trust, because once you go into a marriage contract, by virtue of that act alone, you are creating a trust between you and your husband. However, women must be wary of trying to take out whatever is theirs in favor of the men. Nothing in the Constitution precludes a woman from owning her own property or the man owning his own property, whether before or after the marriage. And you can have an understanding of what property amongst you now becomes mutually owned in that matrimonial setup, or which is not part of the matrimonial property.
So you're both saying that the safest way to guarantee matrimonial property is by building on privately owned land, never customary or ancestral land.
Yes.
To prove this, let's introduce Anne Musisi, who's just won a landmark case against her husband here in Uganda. Anne, welcome to my story. Tell us what happened.
Well, it's a long story. I met my husband in England, where he'd been staying for a very long time, actually 16 years. And when we met, he said to me that he would like to come back. We actually got married in the UK, in my father's church. And then we came to Uganda in 1994 to check it out, to see if I'd be able to come back. And in fact, I fell in love with the place. We then found a beautiful plot opposite the lake, actually in an area that's now become very prime residential land. And when we got back to the UK, I purchased that land with some inheritance money. And I sent it was remitted from my account to his relative's account. And that actually proved to be a very important document in the final legal case in my divorce. We were together for 17 years, but things started getting a bit funny around 15 years. And I was advised that actually the only way that I could get a settlement on my home was by filing for divorce.
Okay, so the point here of introducing Anne's story is because basically if she'd invested on ancestral land, on her ex-husband's ancestral land, maybe she wouldn't be telling us about this landmark agreement. Is that what you're saying?
Anne is able to be to have this option of getting her matrimonial land because it is on private property of her husband, in the names of her husband, and therefore even if it wasn't purchased by Anne, she was entitled as a wife. Even if her contribution was not shown in any record she had kept, she was entitled as a wife.
Is the advice you're giving here is it easy to use it if you're a disadvantaged woman, maybe living in a rural area? And how does FIDA help rural women who are in this situation?
Lucy also in this case, as we see, she's uneducated and she has gone and worked in the UK. She had money to herself, but she also got this problem. So it is not about wealth. It's not about whether you're poor. It's not about whether you live in the urban areas. This is to everyone. Everyone can do it, even a woman. Even, we are not saying that it's only women who face these problems. Even the men face them. And FIDA has gone ahead to go into these rural areas, do awareness sessions. We have created legal aid clinics where we offer legal aid services to the poor and disadvantaged and the vulnerable. And also we have mobile clinics where we go and set them up. We listen to their problems and or handle their issues then a lawyer follows up on their issues.
We're now coming towards the end of the show, and I just wanted to ask, what is your last word to women who are in a similar situation to Lucy's, or who are just about to get married? What would you tell them about property, and perhaps something Lucy wishes she'd known before she got married?
Lucy was privileged to be in a legally recognized marriage. What I would want to say to the women, all the women out there, especially the young, let's try to see that every time it is a marriage, it is not cohabitation, it is marriage legally recognized, because that is the only way you can secure property that has been accumulated during your relationship with this person.
I am aware that many faith-based organizations do carry out counseling services to people who are getting married. And I'll just beseech them to carry this a little bit further, to include some legal education to the couples who are getting married, so that they know what are their legal obligations, what are their rights, and what are their responsibilities, so that at the end of the day, they're not so shocked about what is going to transpire when the marriage breaks down. For cases like Lucy, I know she's had an unfortunate experience, but there's so many other unfortunate experiences women still go through. But she has still got some room where she could get some recovery. One of it could be through some form of mediation, where she can go to FIDA and they have to mediate, whether it is with the direct husband or with the family involved, and see how best she can get out of that trap. Where she has the rental properties, we are aware that some income is coming out of those properties. So an arrangement could be reached as to how much could be attributed to her or to her children, or in the long run, to find out how best they can solve that problem of giving her some compensation, so that she could be compensated for the money she put in to be able to build her life outside her marriage.
So what would you say to women who are just about to get married? What would you advise them in terms of how to invest in their marital homes?
I would agree with Sarah that it's very important when you're getting married to actually think a little bit beyond the lovey-dovey of the beginning, because as you said, there are incidents that come through marriage which are normal to any marriage. I think it's not to be afraid, to know your rights and to stand up for your rights, and to believe that you will get justice in the end if you've done, you know, things the right way.
I think there's also another woman who is involved in this equation who should also seek advice, because we know she has taken over that matrimonial home, but at the end of the day we know she's going to find difficulties in staying in that house also. There will be a provision maybe for her, as long as she's in this cohabitation. Cohabitation is not legally recognized as a marriage, so she should know that she's just friends with that man. Secondly, because it's matrimonial property, it belongs to two other people, her husband and the other lady, Lucy now. And she will never be able to get her hands on this property, even at the death of the husband, because that will be deemed to have been matrimonial residential property for that wife. So if she's brilliant now, she should take heed and maybe get that man to build another house in her names, which she can enjoy.
Well, that brings us to the end of the first episode of My Story. If you're in a similar situation to Lucy's, take a deep breath and make an appointment to see a FIDA lawyer in your area. Details of how you can solve or avoid Lucy's situation are coming up on the screen right now for the FIDA website and FIDA telephone numbers. Meanwhile, thank you very much for watching us, and join us again next week.